The Great Hall of the Galactic Council Station was bigger than most cities on Earth. Ambassador Hyunwoo Kim had been to this place many times, but today felt different. The air itself seemed heavy with fear. Around him, beings from across the galaxy sat in their special seats, each designed for their unique bodies. The crystal beings called Nexari looked like living diamonds. Their bodies caught the light and threw rainbow colors across the walls. The collective were stranger still, thousands of small creatures that moved as one mind, flowing like water across their section of the hall. The lumina were hardest to look at directly. They were made of pure energy, glowing so bright that special screens protected everyone else's eyes. Hyunwoo adjusted his simple human chair and waited. He was the only human here, representing all of Earth in this vast gathering. His dark suit looked plain next to the exotic forms around him, but he sat straight and calm. Elder Nexari Prime rose from the center of the hall. When the crystal being spoke, its voice rang like bells. Council members, we face the greatest threat in our recorded history. The Devourers have awakened. A wave of fear swept through the hall. Hyunwoo had heard stories about the Devourers, but most humans thought they were myths. Ancient beings that slept between galaxies, waking only to consume entire star systems before moving on. The stories said they had destroyed whole civilizations millions of years ago. Our deep space sensors confirm it, continued Elder Prime. They are moving toward our galaxy. At their current speed, they will reach the outer rim in 6 months. The collective spoke next, their thousands of voices creating a strange harmony. We have run the calculations. Their path will take them through 47 inhabited systems. Billions will die. A being from the far side of the hall stood up. Hyunwoo recognized the species, the Valorians, known for their military might. How do we fight them? Elder Prime's crystal form dimmed. You cannot fight the Devourers. They consume energy itself. Every weapon you fire at them only makes them stronger. Every star they touch becomes fuel for their journey. The hall erupted in panic. Beings cried out in their various languages. Some species had never faced a threat they could not fight or negotiate with. The universal translators worked overtime, filling the air with desperate voices in hundreds of tongues. Order! Elder Prime's voice cut through the chaos. We have developed a plan. It is not perfect, but it will save most of us. The great screens around the hall lit up, showing a map of the galaxy. Red lines marked the Devourer's path. Green areas showed the safe zones, the inner parts of the galaxy where most civilizations could retreat. Immediate evacuation of all outer rim worlds, announced the collective. We sacrificed the edge to save the core. Transport ships are already moving. We estimate we can save 60% of the affected populations. Hyunwoo felt his heart sink. 60% meant 40% would die. That was billions of thinking, feeling beings with families, dreams, and hopes. The outer rim included some of humanity's newest colonies, too. The Lumina spoke, their voice like wind chimes. It is the logical choice. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. More voices joined in agreement. The plan was terrible, but it was the only one that made sense to these ancient, wise civilizations. They had seen the Devourers before. They knew what worked and what did not. Hyunwoo stood up. The hall slowly grew quiet as beings noticed the small human rising from his seat. He was young compared to most here, barely 50 years old when some of these beings had lived for thousands. His species was new to the galaxy, having only made contact 15 years ago. Ambassador Kim, Elder Prime acknowledged him. Does humanity wish to evacuate with the others? With respect to the Council, Hyunwoo said, his voice carrying clearly. In the vast space, humanity requests permission to attempt an alternative solution. The silence that followed was so complete that Hyunwoo could hear his own heartbeat. Then, slowly, sounds began. The Nexari made a tinkling noise that he had learned was their version of laughter. The collective rippled with amusement. Even, the serious Valorians made snorting sounds. Elder Prime's crystal form brightened, which Hyunwoo knew meant surprise or confusion. Young human, your species controls barely one star system. You have been part of our community for less than 2 decades. The Devourers are a force beyond imagination. What could you possibly do that we cannot? Hyunwoo looked around the hall at all these ancient, powerful beings. Each of their species had technologies that humans could barely understand. They had ruled the galaxy for millions of years. They had wisdom and experience that humanity was only beginning to learn. But they were all ready to run. "We've got this," he said simply. The translators had trouble with the phrase. Hyunwoo could hear them clicking and buzzing as they tried to find equivalent meanings in thousands of languages. Some came out as "we possess the situation," others as "we have control of this matter." But none of them captured what humans really meant when they said those 3 words. Elder Prime tilted its crystal head. "You have this?" "Have what, Ambassador Kim?" "The solution," Hyunwoo replied. "We just need time to work it out." The laughter was louder this time. A Valorian general stood up, his reptilian features twisted with disbelief. "Human, do you understand what you face? The Devourers have consumed 100,000 star systems. They are older than most of our civilizations. They are unstoppable. Everything can be stopped," Hyunwoo said. "Everything can be solved. You just have to think differently." The collective spoke in unison. "Your species has no experience with threats of this magnitude. Your technology is primitive. Your understanding of cosmic forces is basic. You are asking us to bet the galaxy on the hope that newcomers can succeed where we cannot." Hyunwoo nodded. "Yes, that's exactly what I'm asking." Elder Prime was quiet for a long moment. Around the hall, beings whispered, to each other in their various ways. The stakes were impossibly high. If the humans failed, billions would die while the galaxy wasted precious time on false hope. Finally, Elder Prime spoke. "The Council will vote. All in favor of giving humanity a chance to present their alternative solution?" The vote was close. Very close. The ancient species were tired of war, tired of loss, tired of running from things they could not fight. Maybe, just maybe, these strange new humans could think of something different. "The motion passes by the smallest margin," Elder Prime announced. "Humanity has 72 hours to present a viable plan to this council. If your plan is not acceptable, evacuation begins immediately." Hyunwoo bowed deeply. "Thank you. You won't regret this." As he walked out of the Great Hall, he heard Elder Prime speaking quietly to the other leaders. "Begin evacuation preparations immediately. Do not wait for the human plan. We cannot risk everything on hope." Hyunwoo smiled grimly as he headed to his ship. They thought humans were crazy for taking on this challenge. Maybe they were right. But humanity had never backed down from impossible odds before. Now he had to call home and tell them they had 72 hours to save the galaxy. Dr. Taemin Lee stared at the equations floating in the air above his desk. The holographic numbers and symbols looked like an impossible puzzle, but somewhere in this mess was the answer to saving the galaxy. He rubbed his tired eyes and took another sip of coffee. He had been working for 36 hours straight since Ambassador Kim's message arrived from the Galactic Council. Around him, Luna Base buzzed with activity. Scientists, engineers, and military personnel rushed through the corridors with determined faces. Everyone knew they had less than 2 days to come up with a miracle. "Dr. Lee," a voice called from the doorway. Captain So-Young Park walked into his lab, her uniform crisp despite the chaos around them. "The emergency council meeting is starting in 5 minutes. Taemin nodded and stood up, his joints protesting after hours of sitting. "Have you heard from the outer colonies?" All responding, So-Young replied as they walked quickly through the base corridors. "Mars Industrial Complex is already retooling. Their factories. Europa Research Station has their best minds working on this. Even the small mining operations in the asteroid belt are asking how they can help." They entered the main conference room, where dozens of screens showed faces from across human space. Admiral Jin Ho-yoon sat at the head of the table, his gray hair and lined face showing the stress of commanding humanity's defense. Next to him, Engineer Haiwan Chang pulled up technical drawings that filled the room's main display. "People," Admiral Yoon began, "we have 35 hours to present a plan that will convince the galaxy's oldest civilizations that we can stop a threat they consider unstoppable. Dr. Lee, tell us what we're dealing with." Taemin stood and gestured to the display. The room filled with images of space, showing massive dark shapes moving between stars. "The Devourers are unlike anything we've encountered. They're not really living beings as we understand them. They're more like cosmic processes. They consume stellar energy, converting it into momentum to travel between galaxies." "So they eat stars," said a voice from one of the screens. Dr. Mi-kyung-bae spoke from her lab on Europa. She was humanity's leading expert on alien life forms. "But why? What drives them?" "That's what we need to understand," Taemin replied. "Every other species sees them as destroyers. But what if they're not? What if they're just hungry?" Engineer Chang stepped forward. "The alien evacuation plan makes sense from their perspective. Run away. Let the Devourers pass through. Rebuild afterward. It's what they've always done." "But we don't run," Admiral Yoon said quietly. "We've never run. When faced with problems, humans find solutions." "Then what's our solution?" asked Captain Park. Taemin took a deep breath. "We feed them." The room went silent. Several people stared at him as if he had lost his mind. "Explain," Admiral Yoon ordered. "Instead of letting them consume inhabited star systems, we create new ones. Artificial stars designed specifically to satisfy their energy needs. We build them a feast that doesn't require destroying existing civilizations." Dr. Bae leaned forward on her screen. "Taemin, do you understand what you're suggesting? Creating even one star requires the mass of entire planets and energy levels beyond our current capabilities." "Then we get better capabilities," Taemin replied. "Engineer Chang, what would we need?" Haiwan pulled up new schematics. "Theoretically, we'd need to harvest matter from Jupiter's core, use our sun's magnetic field as a massive particle accelerator, and create controlled stellar formation on a scale never attempted. We're talking about moving planet-sized amounts of material and controlling forces that could destroy our entire solar system." "How long would it take?" Admiral Yoon asked. "With traditional methods? About 10,000 years," Chang replied. With every human working together and technology we haven't invented yet? Maybe 4 months. Captain Park shook her head. The Devourers will be here in 6 months, but we need time to position the artificial stars in their path. We'd need to finish in 4 months or less. So we finish in 4 months, Dr. Lee said simply. More silence filled the room. What he was proposing went against everything they knew about physics, engineering, and common sense. Dr. Bay's voice came softly from her screen. There might be a way to communicate with them. If we could establish contact, maybe we could negotiate. Buy ourselves more time, Admiral Yoon nodded. Dr. Bay, I'm sending you everything we have on the Devourers. Captain Park, I want you to lead a deep space mission to make contact. Dr. Lee and Engineer Chang, start working on this artificial star project. Even if it's impossible, I want to know exactly how impossible it is. Over the next 24 hours, human space became a hive of activity unlike anything ever seen. On Mars, industrial complexes that normally built ships and habitats began retooling to create massive stellar engineering equipment. Europa's research stations started developing new theories of controlled stellar formation. Earth's best minds worked around the clock on problems that had never been attempted. Captain Park took her ship, the Horizon's Edge, toward the outer rim where the Devourers were approaching. Her crew was small but determined. If Dr. Bay was right about communication being possible, they might be humanity's best hope for buying time. 3 days out from Earth, they detected something impossible. A single Devourer, much smaller than the main group, moving ahead of the others. It was scouting, examining star systems in the path of the main force. Dr. Bay, Park called over the comm system. We found one of them. It's alone and it's not consuming anything. It's just looking. Dr. Bay's excitement was clear in her voice. That's not destructive behavior. That's intelligent reconnaissance. Captain, can you get closer without threatening it? Park made the decision that would change everything. We're going in. As they approached the Devourer, its massive form became clear on their screens. It was beautiful in a terrifying way, like a living storm made of dark energy and distant starlight. It moved with purpose, studying each planet and moon with what looked almost like curiosity. Then it noticed them. The human ship was tiny compared to the Devourer, like a minnow approaching a whale. But instead of attacking or fleeing, the entity stopped moving. It simply waited. Dr. Bay worked frantically with her equipment, trying every method of communication she could think of. Radio waves, laser pulses, even mathematical sequences, nothing worked until she tried something different. Captain, try moving your ship in a pattern. Something that shows intelligence but not aggression. Park had her pilot trace a simple geometric shape in space, a spiral that grew slowly outward. The Devourer watched, then began to move in response. Its massive form traced the same pattern, but in reverse. It's responding, Dr. Bay whispered. It understands that we're trying to communicate. What they learned in the next few hours changed everything. The Devourer wasn't malevolent. It was desperate. Through careful patterns of movement and energy pulses, it managed to convey something that made Dr. Bay's blood run cold. Captain, you need to get this message to Earth immediately. The Devourers aren't just looking for food. They're running away from something. Something in the void between galaxies that's even worse than they are. Back on Earth, Tae-min received the news, just as he was preparing his presentation for the Galactic Council. The artificial star project was theoretically possible, but it would require resources and coordination beyond anything humans had ever attempted. And now they knew the Devourers were refugees, not conquerors. "Change of plans," Admiral Yoon announced to the assembled teams. "We're not just feeding them, we're giving them a new home." With 12 hours left before the council deadline, humanity prepared to propose the most ambitious project in galactic history. They would turn their own solar system into a stellar nursery, creating not just food for the devourers, but a place where both species could coexist. It was impossible. It was dangerous. It might destroy them all. But as Ambassador Kim prepared to return to the Galactic Council, he carried with him the collective determination of 8 billion humans who had looked at the impossible and said those 3 simple words that defined their species. "We've got this." The explosion lit up space for millions of kilometers in every direction. Where Research Station Phoenix had been conducting the first test of artificial stellar ignition, now there was only expanding debris and dying energy. Engineer Hae-Won. Chang watched the destruction from the command ship with hollow eyes. 237 people had been on that station. Good people. Brilliant minds. They had volunteered knowing the risks, but that didn't make watching them die any easier. "Status report?" Admiral Yoon's voice came through the comm. Steady, despite what they had all witnessed. "Complete failure," Chang reported, his voice barely above a whisper. "The stellar material achieved ignition for 0.003 seconds before the containment field collapsed. The energy release destroyed everything within 50,000 kilometers." Silence filled the communication channel. Around the solar system, millions of humans had been watching this moment. Their plan to save the galaxy had just killed nearly 300 of their own people and shown the universe that humanity was just as helpless as everyone else. On the Galactic Council Station, Ambassador Hyunwoo Kim felt the weight of failure crushing down on him. Around him, alien representatives whispered among themselves. He caught fragments of their conversations through his translator. "Told you they couldn't do it. Primitive species always overestimate themselves. Now we've wasted precious time while they learned what we already knew." Elder Nexari Prime's crystal form brightened with what Kim had learned was sympathy. "Ambassador Kim, your species attempted something worthy of respect, but now you must face reality. The evacuation fleets are already moving. Join them and save who you can." Kim looked at the images of the destroyed station still playing on the screens around the Great Hall. The explosion looked like a dying star, beautiful and terrible at the same time. He thought about the families who had just lost loved ones. He thought about the colonies already being abandoned in the outer rim. He thought about humanity's promise to save the galaxy. "We need more time," he said. The collective spoke in their strange harmony. "Ambassador, your test has shown that your plan is impossible. How much time will change that?" Kim straightened his shoulders. "Because we haven't failed yet. We've just learned how not to do it." Back in human space, something remarkable was happening. Instead of giving up after the disaster, people were volunteering in record numbers. The failure had shown everyone exactly how dangerous this project was, and yet applications to join the stellar engineering teams increased by 300%. Dr. Young-Soo Han was only 18 years old, but he had been watching the test. Data from the destroyed station with eyes that saw patterns others missed. While the adults mourned their dead and questioned their methods, he was already working on why the containment had failed. "The problem isn't the energy," he told Dr. Lee when they met on Luna Base. "It's the scale. We're trying to control stellar forces with technology designed for planetary operations." Tae-min looked at the young man with interest. Young-Soo had tested as a genius from an early age, with an understanding of quantum mechanics that made his professors jealous. "What do you mean?" Look at the data, Young-Soo said, pulling up holographic displays that filled the room. The moment ignition began, the artificial stellar material tried to expand beyond our containment field. Not because the field was weak, but because stellar formation happens across light years, not kilometers. So we need a bigger containment field? Engineer Chang asked, joining their conversation. No, Young-Soo replied, his eyes bright with excitement. We need to think like a star system, not like a laboratory. Instead of trying to control the process, we help it happen naturally across the space it wants to use. Dr. Lee frowned. You're talking about using our entire solar system as a stellar formation chamber. The energy requirements alone would be impossible. Not if we use quantum consciousness networking, Young-Soo said quietly. The room went silent. Quantum consciousness networking was theoretical at best. The idea that human minds could be linked through quantum entanglement to create a collective processing system was something science fiction writers played with, not something real scientists attempted. Explain, Chang said. Young-Soo pulled up more data, showing brain scan patterns from the test volunteers who had died. Look at their neural activity in the moments before the explosion. Their minds were naturally trying to process the quantum fluctuations from the stellar ignition. The human brain, especially when under extreme stress, generates quantum observer effects that can influence probability at the subatomic level. You're saying their thoughts were affecting the stellar formation process? Dr. Lee asked. I'm saying their thoughts were trying to stabilize it, Young-Soo replied. But 200 minds weren't enough. We need more. A lot more. Captain So-Young Park had returned from her mission to contact the Devourer with new information that changed everything. The entity she had communicated with had shared something crucial through their primitive communication system. It showed us how they create new stars in the void between galaxies, she reported to the Emergency Council meeting. They don't use technology. They use their collective consciousness to influence stellar formation across vast distances. Admiral Yoon leaned forward. Are you saying the Devourers are already doing what we're trying to do? More than that, Park replied. I think they're trying to teach us how to do it. The Scout Devourer didn't flee when more of our ships arrived. It stayed and kept showing us the same patterns. It wants us to understand. Dr. Bay joined the conversation from Europa. If Captain Park is right, then the Devourers might not just be refugees. They might be looking for partners, other conscious beings who can help them create the stellar nurseries they need. The pieces were falling into place, but the picture they formed was terrifying. Humanity would need to link the consciousness of thousands, maybe millions of people in a quantum network that had never been tested. The mental strain could kill more people than the station explosion had. But across human space, volunteers were already coming forward. Captain Yoon-ji Ko led the first group of volunteers for what they were calling the Phoenix Protocol. She had lost friends in the station disaster, but she understood what Young-Soo was proposing. If human minds could influence quantum probability, then enough human minds working together might be able to control stellar formation. We need to be honest about the risks, she told her squadron of volunteers. The neural linking process might kill us. Even if it works, the mental strain of processing stellar-level quantum data could cause permanent brain damage. Her volunteers, 500 of the best pilots and engineers humanity had, listened quietly. But if we don't try, billions of beings across the galaxy will die when the Devourers arrive. Our choice is simple. We risk our lives for a chance to save everyone, or we accept that we failed. The vote was unanimous. 500 humans volunteered to have their minds linked in an experimental quantum network. knowing they would probably die in the attempt. The linking process took place on ships positioned throughout the solar system. Each volunteer was connected to quantum resonance equipment that synchronized their brain patterns with the others. As the network came online, something unprecedented happened. Young Sue, monitoring from Luna Base, watched the neural activity readings with amazement. It's working. Their minds are connecting not just with each other, but with the quantum structure of space itself. The volunteers reported a strange experience. They could feel each other's thoughts, but more than that, they could feel the solar system around them. They sensed the magnetic fields of planets, the gravitational waves from the sun, even the quantum fluctuations in empty space. "We're ready for the second test," Captain Ko reported, her voice carrying the strange echo that came from speaking through the quantum network. This time, instead of trying to force stellar ignition in a small containment field, they let the process happen naturally. The volunteers used their networked consciousness to guide the stellar formation, nudging quantum probabilities instead of trying to control them by force. The artificial stellar material began to glow. Energy levels rose steadily, but controllably. The formation process that had destroyed the first station now proceeded exactly as the equations predicted. Then something went wrong. "Neural feedback increasing," young Sue reported with growing alarm. "The volunteers are taking too much strain. At this rate, we'll lose half of them in the next 10 minutes. Captain Ko's voice came through the comm, distorted by pain. "We can hold it. Just give us more time." But the numbers were clear. The quantum network needed more processing power than 500 minds could provide. They needed thousands of volunteers. But the current linking process was already killing the people connected to it. As the artificial star continued to grow, taking its first steps toward true stellar ignition, Admiral Yoon faced an impossible choice. Continue the test and lose the volunteers, or abort and waste the sacrifice of everyone who had already died for this project. In the depths of space, the scout devourer watched the human attempt with something that might have been hope. It had shown them the way, but now they had to walk the path themselves. The decision would determine not just the fate of the Phoenix Protocol volunteers. The news spread across human space faster than any official announcement could travel. Word of the Phoenix Protocol and its deadly cost reached every colony, every station, every ship through the informal networks that connected humanity across the stars. Dr. Sun-hee Im was working in her lab on Mars when her daughter called. "Mom, I want to volunteer for the Phoenix Protocol." Sun-hee's hand stopped moving over her research data. Her daughter Jinna was 22 years old, a bright engineering student with her whole life ahead of her. "Jinna, you don't understand." "What you're asking. The neural linking process has a 70% fatality rate." "I understand perfectly," Jinna replied, her voice steady through the video call. "I've been following the research. I know the risks. But Mom, if we don't do this, the Devourers will destroy everything. Everyone I care about, everyone I'll ever care about, will die anyway." Sun-hee looked at her daughter's face on the screen and saw the same determination that had driven humans to explore space, to reach for the stars, to never give up when faced with impossible odds. It was the same look she had seen in her own mirror when she decided to dedicate her life to science. "There has to be another way," Sun-hee whispered. "Maybe there is," Jinna said. "That's what you're working on, isn't it? Making the process safer? But until you find that way, we need volunteers to keep the project alive." Across human space, similar conversations were happening. Parents tried to talk their children out of volunteering. Children pleaded with elderly grandparents to stay safe. But the applications kept coming. Chief Won-Sik Nam coordinated the volunteer program from his office on Ceres Station. The numbers were staggering and heartbreaking. For every volunteer slot available, there were 50 applications. Families were volunteering together. Entire research teams were signing up as groups. "This is madness," he told Admiral Yoon during their daily briefing. "We have children as young as 16 trying to enlist. We have 90-year-old colonists insisting they have the right to sacrifice their remaining years for the young. How do I choose who lives and who dies?" Admiral Yoon looked tired. He had aged years in the past few weeks, carrying the weight of humanity's desperate gamble. "You don't choose, Chief Nam. We let them choose. This has to be voluntary or it means nothing." Dr. Sun Hee-im worked around the clock trying to find ways to reduce the mortality rate of the neural linking process. Her research team had grown from 5 scientists to over 300 as volunteers with relevant expertise joined the project. They didn't just want to help with the Phoenix Protocol, they wanted to make it safer for the people they loved who were volunteering. Her breakthrough came at 3 in the morning on a Tuesday, fueled by too much coffee and the desperate love of a mother trying to save her daughter. "The linking process is killing people because we're asking individual minds to process stellar-level quantum data," she announced to her exhausted team. "But what if we don't link individuals? What if we link communities?" Her assistant, a young physicist named Jae-ho, looked up from his calculations. "You mean connect entire populations instead of individual volunteers?" "Exactly. Instead of putting enormous strain on 500 brains, we distribute the load across 50,000 brains. The quantum processing becomes background activity, instead of overwhelming mental effort." The implications were staggering. Instead of needing highly trained volunteers who could handle the neural strain, the Phoenix Protocol could work with ordinary people from all walks of life. The farmer on Europa, the miner in the asteroid belt, the teacher on Luna Base, all could contribute their small part to the vast quantum consciousness network. But it would require something unprecedented in human history. It would require every human being in the solar system to voluntarily link their mind to the collective network, knowing that some of them wouldn't survive the process. Counselor Jae-yoon Seo called an emergency session of Earth's Governing Council. As the senior political leader of humanity, the final decision rested with her. The other council members joined the meeting through quantum-secured channels, their faces grim. "Dr. Im's modification to the Phoenix Protocol gives us a real chance of success," she began. "But only if we can convince 8 billion humans to voluntarily join the quantum network simultaneously." Counselor Park from Mars spoke first. "The mortality rate with distributed processing is much lower, estimated at 5% instead of 70%. But 5% of 8 billion is still 400 million people. 400 million people will die to save trillions," replied Counselor Chen from Europa. "The mathematics are clear. The moral choice is clear." But Counselor Seo wasn't thinking about mathematics. She was thinking about her grandson, barely 5 years old, who would be part of the network if they went ahead. She was thinking about every family that would lose someone, every community that would mourn their dead. "We can't order people to do this," she said finally. "This has to be a choice. Every human being gets to decide for themselves whether to join the network or not." The vote was scheduled for the following week. Every human settlement would hold a referendum on the same day. The question was simple. Should humanity attempt the Phoenix Protocol Global Quantum Consciousness Network to save the galaxy? The campaign that followed was unlike anything in human history. There were no political parties, no competing interests. There was only one question: were they willing to risk everything to save everyone? Commander Dong-wook Choi led the final preparations for the stellar ignition sequence. If the global vote succeeded, his team would be responsible for the actual creation of the artificial stellar nursery. The pressure was immense, but he had volunteered for this responsibility. His engineering teams had been working for months to perfect the ignition sequence. They had learned from the disaster that killed the Phoenix Station crew. They understood the quantum mechanics that Young-soo had discovered. They knew how to work with the Devourers instead of trying to control them. But all their preparation meant nothing if humanity didn't vote to proceed. The vote took place on a Friday. Every human settlement, from the largest cities on Earth to the smallest mining outposts in the outer system, held their referendum simultaneously. The quantum communication network carried the results in real time as each community reported their decision. Earth, 89.7% in favor. Mars, 91.2% in favor. Europa, 87.8% in favor. Luna, 93.4% in favor. The pattern held across every human settlement. Not unanimous. There were people who couldn't bring themselves to risk their lives for strangers they would never meet. But the overwhelming majority of humanity looked at the choice between certain death for billions and possible death for millions, and made their decision. Final tally: 87.3% of humanity voted to proceed with the Phoenix Protocol. Counselor SEO addressed the human race that evening, speaking to 8 billion people across the solar system. In 3 days, we will attempt something that has never been tried in the history of consciousness. We will link our minds across space and time to create a new kind of stellar nursery. Some of us will not survive this process. Some of us are saying goodbye to our families tonight, knowing we might not see them again. She paused, looking directly into the camera, speaking to every human who would soon join their minds to the collective network. But we make this sacrifice not because we are certain of success, but because we are certain of who we are. We are the species that looks at the impossible and refuses to accept it. We are the people who carry each other through the darkness. We are humanity, and we do not abandon those who need our help. The activation of the Global Phoenix Protocol was set for Monday morning, synchronized across all human settlements. In those final days, people said their goodbyes, held their loved ones close, and prepared to link their consciousness with 7,999,000,000 other minds. In the depths of space, more Devourers had arrived. The scout entity had been joined by others, and they positioned themselves near the human solar system, waiting to see if these small beings could accomplish what seemed impossible. On Sunday night, as families across human space shared what might be their last meal together, a message arrived from the Galactic Council. Elder Nexari Prime's words were simple. "We are watching. The galaxy is watching. If you fail, we will remember that you tried. If you succeed, we will remember that you achieved the impossible." Humanity's response was equally simple. "We've got this." But as Monday morning approached, everyone understood the true weight of those words. They didn't mean it would be easy. They meant that, no matter the cost, they would find a way to carry each other through. Monday morning arrived with the gentle rotation of planets and the steady burning of stars, indifferent to the fact that one small species was about to attempt something that would change the nature of consciousness itself. 8 billion humans, across the solar system prepared to link their minds in the largest quantum network ever attempted. In hospitals, doctors stood ready to help those who might not survive the process. In homes, families held hands and whispered final words of love. In schools, teachers gathered children who were too young to understand, but old enough to participate. Dr. Sun Hee-im monitored the network activation from her lab on Mars, her daughter Jinnah beside her. They had argued for weeks about whether Jinnah should participate, but in the end, the choice belonged to her daughter. Neural linking systems are online across all settlements, reported the technician at the main console. Quantum resonance fields are stable. We're ready to begin. Commander Dong-wook Choi floated in his command ship near Jupiter, where the massive stellar engineering equipment waited for the network to come online. His team had spent months preparing for this moment, but they all knew that the technology was only part of the solution. The real work would be done by billions of minds working as one. Network activation in 10 seconds, announced the synchronized countdown that echoed across human space. 9, 8, 7. Admiral Yoon watched from Luna Base, surrounded by the leadership of humanity. They had made their choice, cast their die, committed their species to this desperate gamble. 3, 2, 1. Activation. The change was instantaneous and overwhelming. Across the solar system, 8 billion human minds suddenly became aware of each other in ways that had never existed before. A grandmother on Earth felt the curiosity of a child on Europa. A miner in the asteroid belt shared the wonder of a scientist on Mars. Individual consciousness remained, but it was joined by something larger. Dr. Young-Soo Han, now the lead coordinator of the network, felt his mind expand beyond anything he had imagined. Network integration successful, he reported, though his voice carried the strange harmonic quality that came from speaking with the collective consciousness. All participants are connected, beginning stellar ignition sequence. But something unexpected was happening. As the human network came online, the devourers watching from nearby space began to respond. Their massive forms started moving in complex patterns, adding their own consciousness to the growing quantum field. "They're joining us," Captain So-Young Park reported from her ship. "The devourers aren't just watching. They're participating in the network." Through the expanded consciousness of 8 billion linked minds, humanity began to understand what the devourers really were. They weren't destroyers or refugees. They were gardeners, cosmic beings who spent millions of years traveling between galaxies to create the stellar nurseries that allowed life to flourish. But they had been alone for so long. For eons, they had carried the burden of stellar creation by themselves, using their vast consciousness to guide the birth of new star systems. They had come to the Milky Way not just seeking food, but seeking partners, other conscious beings who could share the work of cosmic cultivation. The Elder. Devourer, ancient beyond human comprehension, opened its mind to the human network. What they felt from it was not hunger or aggression, but loneliness that spanned geological ages and a desperate hope that it had finally found others who could understand. "Begin ignition," Commander Choi ordered. And the stellar engineering, equipment around Jupiter activated. But instead of forcing the process as they had in the failed first attempt, the combined consciousness of humans and devourers guided it gently. Quantum fields aligned. Stellar material began to coalesce. Energy patterns that would normally take millions of years to develop formed in minutes, guided by consciousness that spanned light years. The first artificial star ignited. It was small by stellar standards, but it burned with clean fusion fire that sang through the quantum network like music. The Devourer's joy at this success flooded through the human consciousness, and 8 billion people experienced the wonder of stellar birth through senses they had never known they possessed. But the network wasn't finished. As the first star stabilized, the process began again and again and again. Each new stellar birth came easier than the last as the combined consciousness learned to work together. "Something's wrong," Dr. Im reported from her monitoring station. "The ignition sequence is accelerating beyond our calculations. We're creating too many stars, too fast." What she saw on her instruments should have been terrifying. Instead of the carefully planned handful of artificial stars, dozens were igniting throughout the space around the solar system. The energy release was growing exponentially, threatening to destabilize the entire local star system. But through the network, Young-Soo understood what was really happening. "It's not wrong," he said, his voice carrying the wonder of 8 billion linked minds. "We're not just creating food for the Devourers. We're creating a new kind of stellar ecosystem." The artificial stars weren't random. They were forming patterns, creating gravitational relationships and energy exchanges that would sustain themselves for millions of years. The Devourers had taught humanity not just how to make stars, but how to make stellar communities that could nurture life across vast distances. Through the quantum link, the Elder Devourer shared its memories with humanity. They saw the history of the universe from a cosmic perspective, watched the rise and fall of galaxies, understood the great cycles of stellar birth and death that sustained all life. But they also saw the future, a collaboration between biological, consciousness, and cosmic intelligence that could preserve life even as the universe grew cold and dark. The artificial stellar nursery wasn't just a solution to the current crisis. It was the first step toward ensuring that consciousness itself would survive until the end of time. Ambassador Hyun-Woo Kim stood in the Great Hall of the Galactic Council, no longer alone. The quantum network allowed him to speak with the voice of all humanity. But more than that, he carried the perspective of the Devourers who had joined their consciousness. Elder Nexari Prime's crystal form had dimmed with what Kim now recognized as awe. Around the Great Hall, beings from across the galaxy watched in stunned silence as the artificial stellar nursery continued to grow, creating new star systems at an unprecedented rate. "How?" Elder Prime asked simply. "We learned to think differently," Kim replied, his voice carrying harmonics that the translators couldn't quite capture. "Your species saw the Devourers as a threat to be avoided. We saw them as beings with a problem to be solved. When we offered to help instead of hide, they taught us things we never could have learned alone." The collective spoke in their strange harmony, but now Kim could understand the individual voices within their unity. "You have changed the fundamental nature of consciousness in this galaxy, biological and cosmic intelligence working as one. What will you do now?" Kim smiled, and through the quantum network, 8 billion humans shared that smile with their alien neighbors. "We're going to keep learning. We're going to keep growing, and we're going to make sure that every conscious being in this galaxy has a chance to join us if they want to." The offer was unprecedented. The quantum consciousness network that humanity had created with the Devourers was open to any species that chose to participate. Not forced conversion, not conquest, but invitation to join a community of minds that spanned star systems. One by one, beings throughout the galaxy began to accept. The Nexari found that their crystal consciousness could interface beautifully with the quantum network, adding their long memories and deep wisdom to the collective. The Lumina, beings of pure energy, discovered they could help stabilize the stellar engineering processes. Even the proud Valorians found that their strategic minds could contribute to the growing understanding of cosmic defense. Within a year, the artificial stellar nursery had grown into something unprecedented, a living galaxy where biological consciousness and cosmic forces worked together to create and sustain life on scales never before imagined. Children born after the Great, linking, as historians would later call it, grew up with minds naturally adapted to the quantum network. They could feel the heartbeat of stars, sense the movement of planets, and communicate with beings across vast distances as easily as talking to a friend. The phrase, "We've got this," spread throughout the galaxy, translated into thousands of languages. But the aliens learned that it didn't mean "this is easy" or "we are certain of success." It meant something deeper and more powerful. The absolute commitment to find a way forward, no matter how impossible it seemed, and to carry each other through whatever challenges arose. Dr. Sun-Hee Im, now elderly but still sharp, often sat with her great-grandchildren and told them stories of the time before the Great Linking. They found it hard to believe that beings had once lived in isolation, cut off from the vast community of consciousness that now linked every thinking being in the galaxy. "Weren't you lonely?" her youngest great-granddaughter asked one day. Sun-Hee smiled and reached out with her mind to touch the consciousness of her family, her community, her species, and the vast network of intelligence that now spanned the stars.